the interview. We've been doing workshops for the past, I think, month and a half leading up to the interview. One of the purposes of our Career Readiness Certification Program is to prepare you for the interview to succeed in the interview. And here we are at the one workshop where we're talking about the interview. Typically, we would break this up into 3 workshops. And the reason why we're keeping it as one is so we can prepare for the symposium with a 5-month circuit, if you will, all based in September, so we can dedicate the month of September to that symposium prep. That way, the first week of October, you guys are ready. So we challenge ourselves to do the interview workshop in one workshop. And when we're usually on site working with students, we do this in one workshop as well, but we allocate 2 hours for it. And so today we're doing it in 10 minutes. So I'm going to kind of burn through it, and then we'll open it up to the professionals to engage in conversation. But I have a few steps to really consider as you prepare for the interview. And as I was prepping my notes for tonight's workshop, there was one theme that kept sticking with me the entire time, and it dates back to last week's conversation about networking. Networking and preparing for the networking and preparing for the interview are very similar. And I'll go through those steps. With the interview, break them down into 3 components. There's the pre-interview, the actual interview, and then the post-interview or the follow-up. So to start with the pre-interview, readiness is everything. It's everything. We've already talked about having your resume ready. We've talked about if you have a LinkedIn profile to have that ready. We've worked with you up to this point to be ready to walk into that interview, but there are some steps to think about. And the first step to think about is to research the employer. How do you do that? You can go to Google, you can go to their website, and you have connections within the industry. You might even have connections that are at the workplace. Ask questions, do some digging, collect information. As you do that, take a very close look at the job announcements. What is it all about? What are they asking for? What are the details involved? That's critical data. It also sets a roadmap for how you need to prepare for the interview. Items to bring, maybe even what to wear, the time to show up, that sort of thing. As you're doing all your research, write questions. Just create a list of questions. Questions that you ask yourself to conduct more research, or questions that you'll actually ask in the job interview itself. On that day of, make sure that you arrive early. I'm a 15-minute guy. I arrive everywhere 15 minutes because I don't trust my watch. I don't trust anything. I don't trust the traffic that's going to be in the way as I commute to that spot. But before you get into the car or the bus or the train or your mode of transportation, make sure that your attire, the clothes you're wearing, are prepped, clean, as clean as you are, hopefully clean, and they're appropriate for that setting. So you can ask questions of the interviewer, the gatekeeper, the connections you have. You can look at photos to see what type of attire is appropriate for that interview, for that job. I always lean on the side of being a little bit overdressed because that'll show a little bit more interest. And if they pick on you for being overdressed, it's okay. It's a good laugh, and you'll know next time. Whereas if you're underdressed, there won't be laughter unless it's on their side. When you arrive, bring like a notebook, or I bring a folder. I think in my last workshop talking about this, I said peachy. Bring a peachy that has different items. And I would bring the list of your questions, the resume, and a job announcement, the job announcement. So if they ask you for a resume, hey, would you happen to have a copy of your resume? You just flip that out. It's right there. If you need more copies, they will make the copies for you. With that, I would bring a pen and an extra sheet of paper so you can write notes or questions while the interview is going on. But be prepared. If you walk in with nothing, that's quite all right. But if you walk in with something, it kind of gives that a little bit more formality. So that's always good to have. Practice practice, practice, right? So I would practice the interview questions that you think might be asked. My favorites are, what qualities do you have? Or what qualities do you bring to the employer? The same for the attributes, your experience. How has your experience prepared you for this moment? Things like that. Come up with some good interview questions. Ask us, ask the connections at the workplace, what kind of questions that you might be able to ask. Again, you'll find a lot in your research. Find out if you have any connections at the company, at the employer. And you can do that a couple ways. One is LinkedIn. If you have a LinkedIn profile, you can bunch around LinkedIn to see if you have similarities, connections. You can go to the company's LinkedIn page. You can scroll down to see who you might know, and you can make that happen. I would then reach out to those connections to say, hey, I'm looking to apply, or I plan to interview with at this time. Any information you want to share, and you can create some dialogue with those connections. You bring references to the table. You may have been asked to provide references when you applied. It's usually 3. I would contact those references and say, hey, Pete, by the way, I'm going to be interviewing with XYZ company. I just want to let you know in case you get a phone call asking for more information about me. This is just a courtesy call, but I just want to let you know. Many times when you actually have that conversation with a reference, it can turn into a mini interview, and they can help put you at ease by asking certain questions. They'll ask things like, why do you want this job? Which is a very likely question you'll get in the interview. Then I would look at your social media. I would look at your Facebook, your Twitter, your Instagram, those 3 true social media platforms to see if to make sure that they're clean, that the dialogue is clean, that the photos are of your mom's blessing, and scrub anything else out. I would also look at your LinkedIn to make sure that there are no typos and it matches the resume that you provided in the application or in the mail. And then last, and I kind of already touched on it, was to know your why. So those are just some steps to prepare for the interview. Again, you've already been through that as you led up to the networking, so a lot of those were similar to that experience. And again, just like that, the actual interview is more or less a networking exchange. It's a two-way exchange. They're interviewing you to see if you fit into their company, if you'll actually be a good fit for that role, and if they can see you in their environment or their corporate culture. At the same time, you're looking to see if that's a good fit for you. You might turn it down because you don't like the atmosphere or the people or the color of the wall, whatever it is. Both parties are looking to find comfort and an opportunity to excel. They're hoping to bring you on so you can take their program to a new level. You're looking to bring them on or join them so that you can further your career. I would also ask questions. You wrote questions down on that sheet of paper. Be prepared to ask questions. When they ask, do you happen to have any questions of us? Do not answer the question with no. Always have questions. It shows sincerity, it shows interest, and it shows your intelligence. You did your homework. You went the extra mile to learn about them. So show off your intelligence by asking good questions. Always be positive. If you're negative, that's going to send a ripple effect. And if you can, and this is going to happen because you're prepared, you've done all this work ahead of time, be calm, collected, and confident. And one way to show that, or 2 ways I guess, is to plant your feet squarely on the floor when you're sitting down. You could put your hands on the table or on the armrest of the chair and keep them as still as possible. I make mistakes, I fidget, so I have to be conscious about my body language in the interview so where I'm not fidgeting. So a lot of times I'll cross my hand and just hope to God that I don't twiddle my thumbs or do whatever I'm doing to get that fidgeting experience that I always have to have. My trick is I always wiggle my toes so I can get the bloodstream to go below and not up to my hands. There's not a whole lot more we can tell you about the actual interview because if you've been prepared for that interview, it's going to go well. It's going to go smoothly. You're going to be prepared for questions that they're going to ask. The only thing that you might not be prepared for, it's really on their side. They may not be prepared for your questions, and it's okay to throw them off guard. Just as they're trying to throw you off guard with their questions, you can try to throw them a little off guard or just show your brilliance. And then they'll say, wow, I had no idea, nobody's ever asked us that question. So those are good things. So that's the actual interview. Now, whether the interview goes well or it doesn't, what you do next sets the tone for success, either immediately or down the road. And that's following the interview up. Now, the first thing I do, thank everybody in the room. There might be more than one interview in the room, or there might just be one, but make it a point to say thank you to each one. I have a habit of going up to each one and shaking them in the hand, looking them in the eye, exchanging names that I collected. And again, that's another reason for taking a sheet of paper and a pen. You can write names of the interviewers and just go around and say, thank you very much for this opportunity. I truly appreciate it. Now, if there was a person or more than one person with whom you had more of a deeper dialogue, or there was good body language or eye contact, you just kind of clicked, don't hesitate to ask them for a business card. Again, it shows interest, it shows sincerity, and it's another contact to have. Again, you'll reach out to that person later, and I'll get to that in a second. But it's okay to ask for a business card. You don't have to have a business card in that setting because you don't really work anywhere, but if you have a contact card, it's always good to present one. As you're leaving, always high five, hug. Honestly, just thank the gatekeeper. It's the same thing you do when you arrive 15 minutes early, right? When you arrive, you want to center yourself and get to know the environment, and you meet the gatekeeper. When you leave, exchange greetings with the gatekeeper to say, thank you very much, I truly appreciate it. Sometimes in the interview, they'll ask for your resume, so you can leave the resume with the gatekeeper. But make sure that that person knows who you are, because the interviewers could go to that gatekeeper and ask that person about first impressions. So it's always good to have great first impressions with that gatekeeper. I would, in your car, or whatever your mode of transportation is, or in your notebook, have thank you cards. Fill out those thank you cards. In the thank you card, just don't say thank you. Just say, you can say thank you very much for the opportunity. And if there was something from the conversation that kind of stood out, or that person mentioned, write a snippet in there about that. And then if you were prepared, you brought a stamp with you, you can put that card in the envelope, stamp it, drop it in the mailbox, and wait 2 days or 3 days for that mail to arrive. In the interim, when you get back home, go onto your computer and send an email, again with a nice note relating to the interview. That way they'll get the email. A couple days later, they get the card. Nobody ever sends a card. You be that person that stands out. I guarantee you it'll work. I would then go to any connections that you had with the company and tell them thank you. Just say, hey, thank you for the opportunity, or I just want to let you know I interviewed. I'm excited about this possibility, so thank you for whatever they brought to the table to make that happen. I would do the same with your references. I would reach out to the references. The reason you do it right before the interview is to warn them in case they receive a call just after the interview. It happens. And while you're sitting in the car retracking or recapping the interview, they may be getting that phone call. So you don't want to be too late. But then I would reach out to the references and say, hey, just want to let you know I just interviewed. The interview went this way. And I'm either excited about it or I'm not going to pursue it or whatever, but have an honest conversation with them. If it went well, give them the highlights, because they may use those highlights in the conversation for the reference. But I would reach out to the references again. It's courteous. Nobody really ever calls me and then all of a sudden I'll get a reference check, and I would much rather have known what that person applied for or interviewed for, the company, the position, so I could give a better reference. So the people who do that usually don't get the best reference from me because I don't know all the details. I would also know your schedule. You may be asked for a follow-up interview, so know ahead of time what your schedule is in case they ask something like, would you be available on Friday at 2 o'clock? And instead of answering, I don't know, let me check, or scrolling on your phone to see if you're available, already know your schedule. Again, another sheet to put in your folder. Availability over the next 2 weeks. That's key. The more you know about your schedule off the cuff, they will respond like that person really knows what's going on in his or her life. And it might be, attention to detail. So again, soft skills will jump out at you. Simple things: be kind, be positive, even if it went bad. Keep mum on social media. Don't go on social media, or don't go to a restaurant with a friend and blast the interview, or don't scream from the mountaintops, "That was the greatest interview ever." Just keep it mum. Just for a little while, because you don't want to sabotage what could be or ruin what could be in the future. And then the last thing I would do, maybe it's the first thing I would do after the interview, after I've left the building: get in your car and drive away. Because a lot of times they may be in a room where they're overlooking the parking lot, and if you're in your car cheering or banging on the steering wheel, they're going to see that. And the same goes for the video interviews. Before they click close the meeting, if you're banging the desktop or you're cheering, they're going to see that as well. So I hope these tips help. Again, it was hard to do in 12 minutes,